They called him insane for 10 years. They blacklisted him. They told every studio in town his career was finished if they touched what he was saying. And then one day, he read the court documents. One day, he saw the purchase order, and he couldn't hold it together anymore.
It's like a duck and it quacks like a duck. It's probably a duck.
But here's what changed everything. Before Caviezel's breakdown, before the files dropped, before anyone was ready to listen, there was a man on live television at the Golden Globes who looked directly at the most powerful people in the room and warned them.
Just like Jeffrey Epstein. Shut up! I know he's your friend, but I don't care.
And when the Epstein files unsealed, when the acid purchases showed up in federal documents, when Caviezel finally broke down, that warning hit different. Because everyone in that room knew exactly what Gervais was talking about. And they all knew who else he was protecting by saying it.
Everyone was told, from Rupert Murdoch, from Fox, to every studio, look, if you touch this thing, you will be out, you will be done. You'll be finished in 3 years.
This is the story of how two men tried to tell you the truth, how one was mocked and one was threatened, and what happened when the evidence finally confirmed everything they'd been saying. Let's start with Jim Caviezel, not the actor, not the guy from the movies, the man who was struck by actual lightning while filming The Passion of the Christ and kept going. That's the person we're talking about, someone who doesn't quit, someone who doesn't back down. For a decade, 10 years, he stood in front of cameras, in front of live audiences, in front of anyone who would listen, and described in explicit detail what happens inside child trafficking networks. Not theoretically, not abstractly, based on operations he participated in, based on evidence he reviewed, based on conversations with federal agents who spent their entire careers in that darkness. And for years, the mainstream media response was predictable. You dismiss, label, isolate, conspiracy theorist, religious fanatic, washed-up actor chasing relevance. But something shifted in 2024. The Epstein files started unsealing, and suddenly the things Caviezel had been saying for years weren't theories anymore. They were court documents. They were emails that had been circulated. They were congressional testimony. A sitting United States Congresswoman stood on the record reading coded emails she couldn't explain.
At the emails that have been widely circulated pertaining to the age 11, and I have it written down on my notes, the permission to kill email, the Snow White, the littlest girl was naughty, etc. And some of them pertaining to, jerky, whatever that is.
Jerky. That was the word. That's what they were calling it in the emails. Let that sit with you for a second. Jerky that requires a cold, insulated bag. Jerky stored in downstairs freezers in specific quantities. A jerky rationed in 6 to 8 ounce portions. That is not how anyone talks about beef jerky. And everyone who reviewed these documents knows it. But the acid is what broke him. Not a rumor, not speculation. A documented purchase order, part of the federal record, showing that Jeffrey Epstein, immediately following his indictment on sex trafficking charges, ordered 6 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid to be delivered to Little St. James Island.
You get indicted for sex trafficking, and then you order 6 drums of sulfuric acid right away. Are you really worried about your reverse osmosis plant right after you get indicted?
And here's the question nobody in mainstream media is asking. If the acid was for water treatment, where are the other orders? If Epstein's Island always had a desalination system, there should be years of similar orders. But the order appears after the indictment, not before, after. When Jim Caviezel saw that document, when he saw the confirmation of what he had long suspected about what happens to evidence, about what happens to the children who are never found, he broke. Not in a dramatic, performative way, in the quiet way, a way that happens when something you hoped wasn't true turns out to be worse than you imagined. And that's when Mel Gibson entered the conversation. Gibson and Caviezel have history, deep history. The Passion of the Christ wasn't just a film for these two men, it was a mission. And the price they paid for making it followed both of them for decades. Gibson publicly accused Hollywood of protecting predators. He named names. He was systematically dismantled by media outlets that he believed were run by the same power structures protecting Epstein. He watched his career get buried. He watched his friend get blacklisted twice. And then he watched Caviezel read the acid disposal claims. Sources close to both men described Gibson's reaction as immediate and visceral. Not shock. Worse than shock. Recognition. Because Gibson had been saying for years in interviews that mainstream outlets refuse to air that Hollywood operates on a currency most people don't want to acknowledge. That the same power structures that tried to bury the Passion of the Christ, that blacklisted both of them for decades, are not separate from the power structures that protected Jeffrey Epstein. Now, shift the camera to a completely different room. Same year, a British comedian named Ricky Gervais, who had nothing to lose because his career was already made. Every January, Hollywood gathers for the Golden Globes. The biggest stars, the richest producers, the studio heads who decide whose career lives and whose career dies. They sit at round tables, they drink champagne, they look humble for the cameras. That's the show. That's the performance. And for years, the producers of that show kept inviting Ricky Gervais back to host it because he was the only person in the room who didn't care about being invited to their parties. A man who had no career to lose by telling them the truth.
Do you want to host the Golden Globes? All that stuff I said in the show was true. I said, I'm going to write my own jokes. Right? And I thought, who do I pander to? The 200 richest people in the room, or the 200 million people watching at home.
His audience wasn't the celebrities, wasn't the producers, wasn't the publicists chewing their lips in the front row. His audience was the 200 million people watching at home who had no idea what was actually going on in Hollywood. The people who had never been invited to the parties, the people who had never signed the agreements, the people who had never seen what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. And Gervais took that stage year after year, and he gave those 200 million people a little crack in the wall, a little glimpse of what the people in that room actually were.
Your own way here, in your own plane, didn't you?
If you watch that moment, watch the room, watch the cameras cut away, watch the producers stop chewing, watch the actors freeze in their seats. Because that wasn't a joke, that was a name, that was a flight log. And every single person in that room knew exactly which plane he was talking about. And then this happened.
It's like Jeffrey Epstein. Shut up! I know he's your friend, but I don't care.
He didn't say a name. He didn't have to, because every powerful person in that room had been on a list, in a logbook, at a dinner, at a party, and they all knew who else had been there, and they all knew who they were protecting. That's why nobody laughed. You don't laugh at a warning shot. You sit very still, and you hope the next bullet doesn't have your name on it. But here's what connects Gervais's warning on stage to Caviezel's breakdown over the documents. Both men were trying to tell you about a system, not just one predator on one island, a system designed from the ground up to be invisible. To understand why Caviezel broke when he saw the acid, you have to understand the architecture they're looking at. The networks don't operate like a normal criminal enterprise. They're designed specifically to leave no trace.
Hit send, but they have the password for multiple emails, and they'll just go in, get the message, and then never open or close it, so it's impossible basically to track. It's just like a draft.
That's not paranoia. That's documented federal investigation material describing how these networks communicate. And then there's the coded language, and everyone who has reviewed these documents knows it. Now layer on the geography. Private islands, private planes, flight logs that read like a directory of the most powerful people in entertainment, politics, and finance.
It's an 8-armed octopus, and if you take just out, that arm will grow back. You have to take that.
The machine protects itself, not through some vast shadowy conspiracy, but through something simpler and more effective: complicity, proximity, social architecture that makes predators look safe because the right people are standing next to them. And this brings us to the name that keeps appearing in these documents, the name that connects to Harvey Weinstein, to John of God, to Diddy, and now appears in the Epstein files 5 separate times.
He met Harvey with Oprah.
With Oprah.
With Oprah. So Katie, and she talks about this in an interview, and you know, before the trial, during the trial, we'll play the whole interview. She talks about the fact that if Oprah's with Harvey, then why should I worry about it? I mean, Oprah is like the world's mom. Who is not going to trust the person who's next to her?
A victim describing how she walked toward a predator because Oprah Winfrey was on his arm. Oprah, the world's mom, the most trusted woman in America for 40 years. Her presence didn't just suggest safety, it manufactured it. Now follow the pattern. Proximity, validation, silence, rebrand, philanthropy. That pattern repeats with Harvey Weinstein. It repeats with John of God. It repeats with Diddy. And according to the Epstein files, it repeats with someone else, Ellen DeGeneres. In 2022, Ellen's daytime show ended after 19 years. 2 months later, her ex-girlfriend Anne Heshe was dead. 4 months after that, her DJ and executive producer Stephen Twitch Boss was dead too. Both deaths officially ruled accidental and suicide. Both families left with questions that to this day have never been fully answered. Before we go further, understand this. The show ended, not because the ratings dropped, because something catastrophic happened behind the scenes. Something nobody was talking about on camera, and she wasn't the only one.
Told from the very beginning, don't talk to Ellen, don't do this, you can't, go into her office. It was very nerve-wracking, very stressful. We all walked on eggshells all the time.
Walked on eggshells. That's the daytime show that told America to be kind. Warner Media launched a full investigation. 3 executive producers were fired. The allegations included inappropriate touching, racial discrimination, and a culture of fear that had allegedly been going on for years. And Ellen sat down on her own show and addressed it for the first time on air.
The truth is, I am that person that you see on TV. I am also a lot of other things. Sometimes I get sad, I get mad, I get anxious, I get get frustrated, I get impatient, and I am working on all of that.
A work in progress, a whole apology that never actually said what she was apologizing for. And former employees did not buy it. 17 years, not a moment of weakness. A pattern. The show ended in May of 2022. 19 years gone. 2 months later, Anne Heche was dead. And then a clip surfaced that the internet has never been able to forget.
So that quick moving that was going on the other side of the vehicle. Oh my gosh, he's completely alive. He was trying to get away.
Does anybody else remember that clip? It was harrowing. How can you forget it? It was Anne Heche after her crash, which ultimately took her life. Suddenly sitting bolt upright, unzipping herself from a body bag and looking very much alive. Then we were told a few minutes later she'd...
Sitting bolt upright, unzipping herself from a body bag, looking very much alive. Then, a few minutes later, gone. On August 11th, she was declared brain dead. On August 14th, she was taken off life support after organ donation, officially ruled accidental. 6 days of emotional swings while her family watched the monitors keep beeping. Then, 4 months later, it happens again. December 13th, 2022. Stephen Twitch Boss, the DJ on Ellen's show, the executive producer, the guy you saw in every clip, dancing, smiling, bringing the energy. He was the literal face of the Be Kind brand. And he was found dead in a motel room from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. No indication anything was out of the ordinary. Then, in January of 2025, 1 month before the Epstein files were going to drop, Allison Hulker came forward with something new.
God doesn't give you things you cannot handle. I'm a firm believer in that. There was a moment I was with one of my really dear friends, and we were cleaning out the closet, and picking out an outfit for him for the funeral. And it was a really triggering moment for me because there was a lot of things I discovered in our closet that I did not know existed.
Things she did not know existed. She told BuzzFeed she found a large stash of drugs hidden in shoeboxes. Very alarming. Self-medicating. She had no clue. 2 people connected to Ellen gone in 4 months. Both deaths officially closed. Both families left with questions. And then, a few months later, the files dropped. And every single one of those questions came roaring back. In February of 2026, the Department of Justice unsealed over 3.5 million pages of documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Ellen DeGeneres' name appears in those files. Now, we have to talk about the 3 men, because this is the part of the pattern that is not rumor. This is not allegation. This is court record. This is documented fact. Ellen DeGeneres was publicly close with 3 men who were each separately convicted of serious crimes. Number 1, Sean Diddy Combs. In September of 2024, Diddy was arrested on federal charges. In July of 2025, he was found guilty on 2 counts of transportation for prostitution. In October of 2025, he was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months in prison. Number 2, Harvey Weinstein. Number 3, Jeffrey Epstein. His name appears 5 times in the Epstein files in connection with Ellen DeGeneres. Now look at the timeline. Right after Maxwell's sentencing, Diddy was arrested in September of 2024. The Epstein files with Ellen's name inside dropped in February of 2026. And by that point, Ellen DeGeneres was already in England, in the Cotswolds, quiet, out of the spotlight, away from the country that was about to see her name in federal documents. Now back to Caviezel, because this is where his warning starts to make a different kind of sense. Caviezel has never named Ellen DeGeneres directly in any verified interview. What he talks about is bigger than any one person. He calls it the 8-armed octopus. One producer, one host, one name. The machine keeps going. His argument is that the system is not broken. The system is working exactly the way it was built to work. It protects the powerful through silence. It ridicules anybody who asks questions early, and it controls which stories get pushed onto the front page and which stories disappear quietly. When Ellen's name came up in the Epstein discussions, a lot of people saw it through Caviezel's framework. Here was one of the most powerful figures in daytime television. Massive platform, millions of loyal viewers. And when the heat came, she didn't fight back publicly. She disappeared. She went to England. She waited. But the question Caviezel has been asking for years is different.
85,000 children crossed the border this last year and disappeared. Where did they disappear?
How many of the kids that are being trafficked actually get discovered? We're finding 5 here, 6 here. These groups are there. How many of them actually are there? Do we know? We don't, right? We don't know. And that phrase lands differently when you understand the architecture. When you understand that the children who aren't being found on purpose. When you understand that 6 drums of sulfuric acid were ordered to an island immediately after a sex trafficking indictment. This is why Jim Caviezel broke down. Not because the evidence surprised him, but because the evidence confirmed his worst fears and confirmed that the media, the institutions, the powerful people who could have stopped this chose not to. Why is this not a bigger story in mainstream news? That's the question question that has haunted everyone who looks at these files. 72 children rescued by federal marshals. A blip. 85,000 unaccounted for. Barely covered. Epstein files unsealed. Buried under other headlines. And Tim Ballard, who spent 12 years inside the federal government tracking these networks, was asked directly about the media silence.
Not very much has been, attention has been given by mainstream media. Oftentimes it's more innocent than cynical, perhaps, where it's just, this is too dark. I don't want to expose our audience to this horror.
Too dark or complicit. And Joe Rogan, who spent the first part of the conversation looking for innocent explanations, ran out of road for the charitable version. Because here's what Gervais and Caviezel both understood. Nobody sits in a room with a list of names if they're not connected to that list. Nobody stays silent about what they know if they're not protected by what they know. Nobody rebuilds their career after a public explosion unless the people who matter are willing to help them. Complicity, proximity, social architecture. That's the machine. 20 to 30% of the Epstein files are out. The other 70 to 80% are still sealed. The people whose names are in the part that is sealed know it. The people who flew on the planes know it. The people who went to the parties know it. The people who sat in the rooms with the phones in the pouches and the agreements on the tables, they know it. And right now, in real time, they are selling houses, switching countries, going quiet, hiring new lawyers, and waiting. Ellen DeGeneres is in the Cotswolds. 3 of her on-camera friends are convicted criminals. 2 of the people closest to her died within 4 months of her show ending. Her name is in the files. Her timeline is suspicious. Her departure is convenient. Caviezel told you. Gervais told you. The question now is not whether the next chapter is coming. The question is whose name leads it. They mocked him for it. He was right. He said it on live television. They froze in their seats for it. He was right too. So what happens now? Investigations happen when a few specific things line up at the same time. Public pressure gets too loud to ignore. Credible evidence surfaces. A witness comes forward. A family requests a forensic re-examination of a death. A connected federal case opens a door to new names. All of those things are possible right now. Petitions are circulating. The internet is talking about Ellen in a way it wasn't 6 months ago. And as Caviezel has said for years, one witness statement can change everything. The Epstein files are public record. The flight logs are public record. The purchase orders are public record. The U.S. Marshals rescue operations are reported. The congressional testimony about coded emails is on video. The timeline is documented. The deaths are on record. The connections are real. Jim Caviezel broke down because he's been carrying this weight for a decade, and now the proof is sitting in federal court documents for anyone who wants to see it. Mel Gibson reacted because he watched his friend get called insane for years, and the insane things turned out to be true. And Ricky Gervais stood on a stage in front of the most powerful people in the world and said what nobody else would say, knowing exactly what he was risking. That takes a different kind of courage than most people understand. The dam isn't broken yet, but it is cracking. And when it breaks completely, when the last 70% of those files come out, when the questions the families are asking finally get answered, when the timeline of the deaths gets examined forensically, when one witness finally steps forward with something more than suspicion and provides something that stands up in court, that's when everything changes. That's what Caviezel was crying about. Not the statistics, the children, the ones who won't be found because there's nothing left to find, and the system that makes sure of it. Could you have saved the kids? Did you do it? That question is for everyone who now knows what's in these files.